I thought that was an amazing race with a stupid finish. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Joe.
Well, as you can see, it's a little bit different format this week. As far as producing podcasts and different content, if you're watching the video portion of this, it is different from the normal setting. We're both not in the studio this week. This is kind of our rookie year, if you will, for creating videos and podcasts and whatnot. And damn, we've had a lot of curveballs this week, huh? Or this year so far, huh?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a interesting last few weeks. This week's more interesting, I think, than any, especially for me. But we found a workaround, and here we are. We got a little much-needed kick in the butt to actually try the virtual thing and see how this works for us. We've talked about doing it for a year or so, so I'm excited to kind of see how the end result looks. But it is a work in progress. But hey, we're here.
Yeah, it's certainly not exactly where we want it to be. It's below our standards, but you work with what you got. And as we continue to grow, as we've mentioned several times already, we'll continue to upgrade our equipment to provide you the best content. But besides all the video and all this other stuff, the main reason why we're all here is we've got to talk about some NASCAR. We've got a lot of action this weekend. Um, Only two more races left for the playoffs start, and there's still two drivers in on points. Um, Kevin Harvick looks to be safe based on points, but if we get a new winner here at Michigan and a new one at Daytona, he could be on the outside looking in. But this is his favorite track. But before we get to this, it has been a wild week. I've been listening to a lot of different podcasts trying to get people's takes, kind of their opinion on the Indy road course. Um, you and I really haven't conversed much about it, little things here and there. So besides getting my butt kicked in DraftKings this week, I don't know about you. I thought that was an amazing race with a stupid finish.
Yeah, it was a fun race to watch, and it was something that ending was wild. Like if you just replay the race and how it was going, it was just going to be a Kyle Larson win, just like everything else we'd already seen, and we would have went on to the next weekend. But that last little segment really put a damper on it, and I don't know if you really can point fingers anywhere for how that incident played out, but it wasn't what we all wanted. Basically, the way it played at the end, like we were wanting it to be a little bit different, because there were guys that were threats the entire race that got taken out by just the chaos that ensued because of that curb.
So in real time, the once the mayhem started, I think there was around 10 laps to go or so. Those last 10 laps include like real time was almost as long as the previous, 70 something laps. Um, the race beforehand was pretty clean. I thought there was a lot of great action. We saw Chase Elliott up front a lot. He looked like he might run away with it. As you said, Larson came in kind of more around that second stage, that last stage, and really was putting down some fast times. Didn't You didn't know exactly how it was going to go. You might have got a nice little Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson battle at the end, but really we didn't see that at all. As you mentioned, it was the curb that really shook some stuff up. I have never, and I don't think anyone has ever seen a curb eat an entire splitter and underpinning. I forget who it was who initially brought this out. This was like right before the main chaos started. Someone ran over that curb, and they called a caution. I actually was about to tweet, man, I hope there's a caution because I need a little shakeup for my DraftKings lineups because it wasn't bad, but it wasn't what I wanted. Some guys just they weren't in the right position. I was like, I need a, especially Chase Elliott. I was like, I need a restart. Maybe he can get him on the restart or something. There looked to be a little tiny piece of metal sticking up from the curb that obviously somebody ran over would have destroyed the tire. I'm like, okay, so yeah, I think they're just gonna go over there, pull it out, and away we go. They had to like jack up the curb a little bit, and they pulled out a piece. It was like this freaking long.
Yeah,
Going,
no.
it was the entire front splitter.
And then at that point, it was compromised. The curb was compromised, and then whenever you have those cars going over at full speed for so many laps, and physics just play a part, and next thing you know, enough cars went over right at the wrong time, and we saw some chaos ensue directly after that.
So I'm sure you're familiar with the character Captain Hindsight on South Park. So let's
Hmm.
play a little Captain Hindsight here, because in real time, it's obviously very difficult to make some of these decisions. Were you surprised that NASCAR didn't throw a yellow flag when Truex spun out, going around that same section, and we saw, at least on our screens, debris going everywhere? What was your thoughts
Yeah,
at that moment?
I saw before that happened. I saw all the debris get hit, and then he ended up in the grass, and I thought that he ended up in the barrier as well. So at that point, I thought we were going to get a caution because of just how much debris was spewed across that section of the track. But if he kept it going, and I guess they determined that there wasn't enough debris on the track at that point, so they came flying through there very soon after that, and that's when things kind of went haywire.
So in real time, with the camera angles that we saw, we could obviously see the debris. I heard Dale Jr. on his podcast say on his screen he couldn't see anything because he was in the sun on a scissor lift and the glare. He's like he had no idea there was that much debris. I would imagine race control would have been inside to be able to see that. I don't understand. Maybe they thought that the track was clear enough. I think, I truly think one of the big reasons why is they had golf on after NASCAR. That's why we had such an early start. That's why we were all crammed to uh, get some, like us in particular, get some content out right after qualifying and get it out to everyone so they could build their lineups before the race. So it was packed day on NBC. And I think that might have led a little bit to the hesitation to throw caution because it was already a little, not later. I mean, it was a pretty quick race, but they were trying to wrap it up. But then, like you said, the next lap comes and the first few cars make it through no problem. And for some reason, William Byron, he hits the curb, doesn't do really anything different than he'd been doing, or even what some of the guys in front of him did. I guess that last car went through, it was just enough to tweak the curb. And same sort of thing, it just ate the splitter. But this time, and again, I couldn't tell this live, this is what I've kind of heard post race, is that it essentially destroyed the radiator and it threw water coolant down on the track immediately. And that's why we saw Logano go sliding hard into the wall. Like that was you did I it's kind of hard to tell obviously on TV how fast those guys are going around that spot. You know, you can tell like, oh, they're going pretty quick, but when you saw how hard Logano hit that wall, it was like, oh,
Yeah, he destroyed the tire barrier. Yeah, he destroyed that tire barrier that was there, and he said it on the post race interview that it wasn't as hard of a hit. He said he barely even felt it, but yeah, it looked really, really bad because he was going in there. They were hauling through that portion and then going full speed in those tires. Yeah, it did a number on that section of the track.
and
Took them
then
a while. We were under a red flag for that portion of uh, the aftermath.
when it was almost like well, honestly, it was almost something I hadn't really seen in Cup in a while. You just saw car after car after car. I remember watching a video one time. I think it was maybe the Australian, uh, the Super V8 cars or whatever they're called. It may have been a different series. I don't. I'm not sure, but I just remember, they were all.
I think I know exactly what you're about to tell me.
Yeah, they were all on slicks. It started to rain just a little bit, and they were going into a corner, and they all just pile drive right into the wall because they had no traction. Um, and it's almost comical to watch. You're like, oh my God, they just keep pulling it. That's almost what it was like. I think there was what, seven, eight, nine cars that just kept coming through. I was afraid, honestly, another car was going to smack Logano. Uh, Thankfully, that didn't happen. But it just mayhem. So they finally get all that cleaned up. Like you said, we're under red flag for a long time. Then we have a certain car. I think I know who it is, but I won't say. But a car that was definitely not competing for the win had some sort of oil leak and drove around the entire track like multiple times. So then they had to put down a bunch of speedy dry. So that took even longer. And I don't remember if it was at this point. I think they finally got back green, and then they had another caution, and then next thing we know, there's still another restart to go, and we're all switching to NBCSN because NBC
Yeah.
had enough. They're like, it's time for golf. Um, were you able to see the end of that? Were you still tuned in at that point?
Fortunately, I was able to tune in. I had the proper channel to be able to do that, so I was able to tune over. I know some people lost it, and then also one thing about that race is that I saw that some portions of the country, North Carolina and a couple other spots, weren't able to see the race because of the Panthers game or something along those lines. So the numbers were affected pretty drastically for this race in comparison to some of the other Indy races of past years as well. So
Oh, I would
the
be so mad if I was in North Carolina.
yeah, so that definitely probably left a sour taste in some people's mouth for a preseason football game. But we're getting to that time of year where football is the dominating force here in the United States, and especially here in Texas. And I'm hoping that we don't get interrupted service for something along those lines.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Cowboys and Texans, they usually play on Fox and CBS, so they're not on NBC too often. So hopefully we'll be fine there. But I'm with you. I hope that doesn't happen. So anyway, we're finally got the track basically where we want it. We're on NBCSN. We don't have to worry about switching anymore. And we get, I believe, at least at that time, one more restart. And
Hmm.
you're thinking, okay, probably going to see some bumping and banging, of course. I mean, these guys, it's the end of the race, and you don't know quite what's going to happen. You're hoping you don't get another crazy wreck that's going to bring out another caution. Because at this point, even I'm just like,
Yeah,
just end this race. Like,
because at this point, like we already had a red flag, and
I think we had maybe
we
even
were
two.
already hope. Was that?
I think we might have had two red flags.
Yeah, and we were both really initially hoping for a caution to kind of change the dynamics of the race, and that happened. And then whenever we got to this final restart, I actually was sitting in a nice position overall. I had everything lined up basically the way I wanted it to. I was sitting in the green by thousands of dollars. And then we go green this final time, and everything kind of just again fell apart.
So I didn't check the my DK lineups. I'll glance from time to time. Um, but I was at this point, I'm just like, whatever's it's gonna be is gonna be. I don't need to know if I'm up or down. I like let's just enjoy this from the NASCAR perspective. So you have Hamlin going for the first win of the season. You have Chase Briscoe in his home state, his home city, his home track, going for his first Cup win. If he wins, he's in the playoffs. He had led some laps before. I don't know how if you shifted any of your ownership kind of after we talked about it, but I still carried a decent amount of ownership from Chase Briscoe. I still thought he could win this race. Obviously, when he was leading, I'm like, yeah, but obviously very scary with the guy. I guess with his kind of history so far this year, starting second, there's obviously not a ton of upside. But he was cheap, so I was like, okay, let's roll with it. So I was, like you said, kind of at the end, like, okay, like let's see, let's do this, Briscoe. If it can't be Chase Elliott, let's let it be Chase Briscoe, right? So they get down into turn one. AJ Allmendinger finally shows up. I don't know what he was doing most of the race. He makes it 3 wide going into that first turn. I guess I'll kind of tell you from how I perceived it. I'm curious. The reason I'm kind of going into such detail is I'm kind of curious your how you perceive this, because this I've heard so many different takes. Obviously, Denny and Chase have their sides of it. I haven't really heard Allmendinger say much about it. They go 3 wide into turn one. Next thing we know, we see Chase Briscoe going through the grass. He doesn't come back on the track immediately. He decides to take a left. He comes out slightly in front of Hamlin. You can't tell quite if it's just Hamlin with the momentum or if it's Briscoe kind of saying, hey, I'm going to secede this spot because I know you were ahead of me when I went off the grass. I'm going to get behind you and then I'm going to try to pass you. Either way, Hamlin gets in front of Briscoe. They start chasing each other for a couple turns. Then you hear the announcers say, that's going to be a penalty on Briscoe. He's going to have to do a stop and go. And you're like, oh, no, like his day's done basically. He
Oh
didn't
yeah.
have a good finish. And you're like, okay, well, let's just see what he happens. And he's still racing Hamlin hard. And then he bumps him. Didn't look like it was aggressive from my perspective. I mean, he gave him a good little tap, but it didn't look like he was coming in too aggressive. Next thing you know, Hamlin goes spinning. Just spinning out into the grass. Briscoe keeps going. And then you hear the announcers basically say, all right, Allmendinger's now in the lead because Briscoe still has to serve a penalty. So obviously he serves a penalty. The NASCAR ended up, I think, parking him. So he finished last on the lead lap. So it was like 26th, 27th, unfortunately. What's your opinion on that situation? One, do you think Hamlin forced Briscoe out? Do you think Briscoe bailed out early? Do you think Briscoe wrecked Hamlin on purpose? It's a racing incident? Because after the race, Briscoe said that he didn't know he was under penalty until after the contact with Denny. He's going for the win. He just bumped him in the right rear and it sent him. It was nothing intentional. They obviously had their little face to face at the end of the race. I was surprised Hamlin didn't do anything, that he accepted it. I mean, that was kind of surprising. I don't know if he had thoughts of, I've been in this situation before with Chase Elliott in Martinsville a few years ago where I wrecked him to try to win the race. I don't know if that's going through his head or not, but there's no punches thrown. Doesn't seem like there's any uh, foul language exchanged either, just talking and then going their separate ways. So how did you interpret the end of that race?
Well, when I saw it live, yeah, when I saw it live, when Chase Briscoe went through the grass, I was like, well, everything that was lined up my way is now gone because I knew he was going to have to serve a penalty. And then whenever they came across and said that he's going to be serving that penalty, I was like, well, knew it. And then almost immediately, it looks like he spins out Denny Hamlin. In my opinion, that's what I thought happened, is that he kind of got ticked off because he had a great shot of winning. He came into that corner and kind of got forced off, but I don't know. It happened so quickly. We've seen so many different replays and so many different opinions. In my opinion, I thought it live, that's what it looked like. But after seeing it multiple times now, he didn't really give him that much of a push. Like, it wasn't that aggressive overall. It was in the heat of things. That's kind of what it looked like in my initial viewpoint. But after going back and seeing it, I don't think he did it intentionally.
Hmm.
That's I he's a rookie. I would imagine anybody in that situation's done that before, at some level of racing, and that's what the repercussion is. You have to serve the penalty. So, being that NASCAR parked him, that was a big impactful situation on the race as well. It was kind of cool to go ahead and see Denny take this road of seniority and say, yeah, the guy's young, he's still learning. This is his home track. He really wanted the win. Like there's a lot of things that, to me, Chase Briscoe's not that kind of guy. He's not out there looking for blood. He's out there trying to race. That's his home track. He won there in the Xfinity Cup last year. And it's just something that he was really wanting for his own benefit. And unfortunately, it just didn't play out for him at the end of the day.
It's pretty weird because depending on which replay I see, I have a different opinion of what happened. So when I saw the initial what NBC showed us,
Right.
I was like, obviously Allmendinger tried to run the best line that he could. Hamlin's in the middle, so he's in a tough spot. But it looked like he sort of willingly took that far lane out. It looked like he really shoved Briscoe out. Now it's we'll get to that. It looked like he shoved it out because I have an opinion on kind of maybe how that should change or whatnot, but it looked like Hamlin kind of forced him out. And then once he made it back on, I thought maybe he kind of thought, well, hey, I was forced out. I'm gonna keep racing. And then I thought maybe he figured out he had a penalty, and it was kind of, hey, you cost me this win. You're not gonna win either. Because you're right. I think initially he's a rookie. I don't think, I mean, the rules, but when you're in the heat of the moment, I mean, obviously I've never been in that situation, but I can only imagine. I mean, heck, when we're all in traffic, we're not thinking normal either, right? Everything's heightened. We're like, what's this person doing? What's this person doing? You're not thinking about every little detail.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure the thought of him being penalized for going through the grass, that might have just slipped his mind. He's just thinking, hey, I got to win. I got to win. Probably hears on the radio, hey, stop and go on turn 10, and he's just like, you know what, screw it. You cost me my first win. I know you want this win this year. It's not happening under my watch, and then he dumped him. It's kind of what it looked like. But then I kind of see like your point of view as like, I think he was just trying to race him. I think he was just trying to get up to him. And then I watched the onboard of Chase Briscoe. I actually was kind of watching it live, but watching it like the next day kind of helped. To me, it looked like Briscoe was shoved off, but it looked to me like he just said, like it looked to me he could have easily came back on and been about fourth, 2 laps to go. He can make that up potentially. It's going to be hard, but he could do it. It looked to me like he just said, nah, I'm just going to go to the left. And it looked like he didn't need to. He just chose to. And at that point, I'm like, I don't know why he would make that move. There was enough room to get back on the track. Now, again, I don't know what all they can see. Maybe he just truly felt like, hey, there's no way I can merge back on the track. But to me, it looked like he was still going that line, and he just was like, nah, and just made a hard left to go out. And at that point, I was like, this didn't look right. And then when I saw him from the onboard, it almost to me looked like he took Hamlin out on purpose, and then kind of gave his excuse after. So to me, it's almost really which replay do you kind of want to go by? Because if I go by NBC, I think it's just kind of heat of the moment racing thing, nothing malicious at all. Hamlin for sure forced him out, made it tough for Briscoe. But when I watched the on board, it looked like he could have held his ground more, and he chose to just hang a left.
It's Everybody's got their own opinion. That's the beautiful thing about this situation. I know that even multiple audio sources have been released throughout the week, and people have their own opinion on, hey, this wasn't. There's so many ways you can view this, but at the end of the day, what are the drivers? Are they? Is it completely off the table now, or are they still going to gripe and moan and complain about it and have it linger into the coming weeks? I don't know if at this.
So let me ask you this. Because I want to get to Michigan here pretty soon, but I want to just kind of end with this. Do you think that NASCAR should kind of moving forward? Do you think for some of these road courses, do you think there should be a force out rule like they have at super speedways. So super speedways, if anyone doesn't know, there's a yellow line that goes all the way around the bottom of the track. You are not allowed to go below that line and advance your position. If you go below the line but you maintain it, there's no harm, no foul. But if you go below the line to try to pass someone, you get in front of them, you will be penalized. But if, because people were doing this, if you got a line, you got a run, and someone comes from the top side and is coming down hard on you, and you go down to miss them so you don't destroy your car, and you go below the yellow line and you still advance your position, the other guy actually gets a penalty for forcing you out. Do you think that NASCAR should put something like that in place at road courses, or do you think that makes it too hard to judge? It's already hard to kind of tell sometimes in super
Oh yeah,
speedways, but
yeah. It'd be way too hard to judge because there's some of these road courses that we see are pretty narrow. Some of them are wider, obviously, but if at some of these narrow ones, it wouldn't be able to, like, you're already scraping by for every inch that you can get. And so, in my opinion, I see where you're coming from, and I'd see the benefit, but I don't think there's been enough situations that that's really going to affect the outcome of the race. Like if Chase Briscoe was able to get on even quicker instead of cutting as much through the grass as he would have, like you said, he could have maybe lost a couple positions and made it up. Like that was his own call. So at that point, it's on him.
do you think that they should maybe rewrite the rules to where it kind of allows for a situation like that to continue? You get forced off the track, you have to cut the corner, but if as long as you don't advance your position, or if you get in front but you give it back, kind of like a restart, if you get to the line before the guy that's supposed to, as long as you give it back, the NASCAR considers it no harm, no foul.
It's still cutting the track. It's still a penalty in my opinion. Like you you can't cut off sections of the track. That just makes the race shorter. So therefore, in my opinion, you have to do everything you can in your power to stay on the racetrack.
Yeah, I'd like to see them rework the rules to allow for that to continue. Like before the Hamlin spin, I personally would have been okay with it. Now, of course, I'm gonna be a little biased. I had quite a bit of Briscoe, but I think if really anyone in that situation, even if Briscoe had done that to Hamlin, I think if you don't advance your position, you get in behind right where you were, and you continue, but you were clearly taken to the very edge. I'd like to maybe see some gray area there because I think that would have been one heck of a battle for that next lap. And they may have ended up wrecking each other regardless, and Allmendinger
Yeah.
may have still won. But the fact that NASCAR had to get in after the debacle from all the red flags and all other stuff, they had to step in and force a guy to do a penalty when, in my opinion, clearly he was not trying to intentionally cut that corner initially. He did try to make the corner until he ran out of real estate. That's kind of where I'm at. I know there's no easy answer. Who knows how NASCAR will officiate it? I heard, I think it was, oh shoot, it may have been Steve Letarte say instead of having open grass there, you have maybe a couple different tire barriers set up, so you almost have to do like a little maze. So that's going to kill your time, and so that's kind of your penalty anyway. Maybe they could do something like that. Um, but I think they need to rework the rule book a little bit for these road courses because it's a really good product. The racing was good up until the curb incident, but little things like this, it's like, okay, we need to fix this. We need to fix that. I think we need to go probably the first stage. You probably don't throw a caution for stage one. You let them keep racing. Um, local cautions when you can. Sometimes you have to have full course cautions and red flags. But I think if they can rework that for next year, I think the road course action would be uh, much better. So, any little closing thoughts on the road course? I mean, we had some crazy stuff like Justin Haley finished eighth. Um, None of us expected that after that mayhem. Obviously, we mentioned AJ won the first win for Colleague. They get a win as a part-time team before 2311 gets their first win. Um, any takeaways from the Indy road course that you want to talk about?
Well, we touched on a lot of it, but yeah, I was just really impressed that AJ Allmendinger and Colleague Racing were in a position to get a win and such an iconic track. That's just it's a big deal for that team. It's another winner for the season. Obviously, he's not going to be able to find a spot into the playoffs because of the situation of them not being a full-time team and all that. That factors into that metric. But again, advertised as the best season ever. We got another new winner. We thought we'd see a new winner this weekend. I was really thinking it was Chase Briscoe heading into the week. We were really, really close on that one. Just happened to see Kyle Larson do his Kyle Larson things too throughout that day. And he would have easily won that race if things would have kind of went the normal route that it looked like it was going for the majority of that race. So um, I'm just looking at it. We're 6 out of the 7 road courses off the schedule now. We'll have the one here coming up in the playoffs, and after that, we'll see how many are on the schedule for 2022.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I think maybe slightly less would be okay. But I do like the road courses. I think it's a nice change up. I don't think they need to go too much more. Um, I thought all in all, I thought the racing at Indy was good. I mean, the Xfinity race was good. We didn't even talk about the curb in Xfinity that destroyed like 6 or 7 cars there. So NASCAR and the track definitely had some issues. If they can work through it and create a better product next year, I'd be okay with it. I think, I mean, the fact I'm looking at it now, I think wasn't there supposed to be what 80 or 82 laps in this race,
Yeah.
and there ended up being 95. Um,
Wow.
Yeah, it was there was so many laps under caution at the very end, um, which is extra laps led points. So it obviously was good for some people. No, nobody really for us. But I thought it was really good. I think I would be perfectly. I mean, if they're going to come back to Indy, they need to do the road course because the oval just doesn't produce this sort of excitement. I know some people are saying it's amateur, but it's like, look, you got to go with what the cars give you. Apparently, these new cars are going to be even better for road coursing or road course racing. So I hope they come back. I thought all in all it was a good race. Just the track and NASCAR needs to clean up a few things so we don't have this ridiculousness at the end or this much of it. But all in all,
Yeah.
I'm happy. It was cool to see AJ win. Great road course racer, of course. Really happy for a colleague. We're both pretty good fans of Akala and Xfinity, and we're excited to see what them and Justin Haley and whoever's in that second car, what they do next year. This will obviously really catapult them. Um, it's exciting to see more competitive teams kind of coming into the Cup Series. Now, obviously, new car, we don't know what we'll see, but I think we're going to get a lot of great action from a lot of different teams next year.
Yeah, and we talked about this year maybe seeing more parity than ever. We've talked about it throughout the season, especially some of our early episodes of this year, how our team's approaching it, and we'll probably see more winners than we had in recent years, and that's exactly what we've seen. It's been a lot more parity. We've seen Michael McDowell, AJ Allmendinger, guys that you don't usually hear being on the in winner circle, and we heard it week 1 at Daytona. So this year is definitely a little bit different than most. The final year of this car before we go into that next gen car. So we'll continue to see how this thing plays out with 2 regular season races left. This week we are here at Michigan International Speedway and 2-mile track, so we'll be in the 550 horsepower stuff. I'm excited to talk about what we can expect kind of this week going into this race.
So closing out Indy, before we say anything about Michigan, is there anything else in between that you wanted to discuss? Like I said, we haven't really been able to talk much this week. Is there anything? There's been obviously some silly season news. You want to talk about any of that, or you want to just get into Michigan?
Well, I think some of this we can jump in and mention some of that because I know we got some spotter changes and things like that that have happened that we could mention, but it's kind of whatever floats your boat.
Well, I was going to say if we're going to talk about Michigan, let's just say play Kyle Larson and let's just call it a day. I mean, that's
Yeah, I know you're all over Kyle Larson. I'm all over another Kyle. I really like Kyle Busch this weekend. I've got some bets out there on him. I think that with his performance in this 550 horsepower package, he'll be there to compete with Kyle Larson, in my opinion, this week. So I'm excited to dive into this.
Yeah, I'm joking. Obviously, there's some really good, interesting plays this week. Um, we did our projections, and it didn't seem like so. Obviously, there's more laps. There's a lot more performance points. So I guess let me break that down. Um,
Yeah, because we got 200 laps. Because like it's a 400-mile race, so that gives us 200 laps, and then that allows for 140 potential performance points, those dominator points, if you will, that we're hunting. That's really the difference maker. So you're looking for a dominator. These stages, we're looking at 60, 60, and 80, so they're a little bit more segmented. And we've got some opportunities in there for some strategy. And obviously, we've seen Kevin Harvick dominate here. We've seen him win the past 3 races. So he's somebody that's been talked about a lot this week. To even toss into the conversation we had about Kyle Larson being a 3-time three-peat winner here as well. There's a lot of things to really dissect this week.
yeah, and there's some strong cases to be made for several drivers, and those same drivers, there's also a lot of cases to be made against them. You mentioned Kevin Harvick. I mean, realistically, statistically, this guy at this track, I mean, he may not consider it his best track. I don't know what he considers his best track, but when you look at his performance here versus most of the tracks we go to, we're used to seeing him kind of towards the top of the leaderboard. But if we look at just the last 4 races here, and you mentioned he won the last 3, Logano won the other one. He has a driver rating of 133.8 versus 112.9 for Logano, who's second over the last 4. Now, Larson obviously didn't race here last year, so he's only got 2 out of these last 4 races, but he's down actually in 9th, kind of comparative. His stats are better from a few years ago. We'll get to him here in a second. But Harvick, I mean, he's getting the most fastest laps, um, almost the most laps led over these last 4 races. DK points, he's up 21 points over the essentially the next best guy. But he hasn't been Kevin Harvick this year. He doesn't have a win
Yeah.
yet. He's gotten some really good finishes. I mean, you look at some of his top 10 stats and whatnot. It's still really good. His average finish is really good this year, but he still is not dominating. Do we think that he can break through at a track that he's been so good at? Is this the week finally?
I think this is a week you can look at him and feel a little bit maybe more comfortable in trying to roster him, because even in this 550 horsepower package, he's been strong. He's got 8 top 10s out of 10 races in this package. So he's able to get the top 10, but the key there is, will he be able to get those performance points that we're looking for to really pay off the price tag that we need him to? He's not the Kyle Larson salary, but getting a top 5 is something that we'll definitely need to see from him. But if he's not getting any of the performance points, then it really doesn't matter. Based on everything I'm looking at for this series or for the 550 horsepower stats, I could see him actually getting some fastest laps. And the question is he able to get any laps led? Is he able to cut into with the duo of Larson and Chase both starting 1 and 2 this week? Is he going to be able to even get up there to lead? Like, and then Kyle Busch being as fast as he is in this setup. Like, there's so much to take a look at. I don't know if he's able to reach a value level that is going to be super comfortable, but I definitely want to have exposure, because if there is a week he's going to go off, this is going to be the week, because he needs a win. He's already pretty much pointed his way into the playoffs, but this will sure him, and it will help him propel himself for the playoff situation moving forward.
So you mentioned those 10 races so far in 550s. I do want to point out, I mean, you alluded to it, but I want to point out fastest laps, Kyle Larson is by far averaging the most, 35 and a half over those 10 races, 85.2 laps led over those same 10 races. When we look at Harvick, he's averaging 6.3 fastest laps and 2.9 laps led. Obviously, averages don't tell the whole story, but they kind of can help paint a little bit of a picture. And if we compare Harvick to Kyle Busch, you mentioned it, Kyle Busch has been pretty fast. He's getting 16.1 fastest laps, averaging almost 18 laps led. Hamlin's been pretty good in this package. Not as fast, but he's been getting some laps led. Byron getting a ton of fast laps on this type of track. Even Brad is getting more. Brad and Truex are both getting more than Harvick in this package. So while I plan on playing some Harvick because of his prior performance. The hesitancy is I think he can get a good finish, but with his price tag at what is it at? What 10,000? It's at
10,000.
10,000. He's starting eighth. We might even see him get to fourth place by the end of this race, but he's going to have to get some fastest laps and laps led to be of value. If he does, great, but it's concerning. It is really concerning because I didn't realize until I started diving into the stats, I didn't realize that Chase Elliott is actually pretty solid here at Michigan. If we look at, let's see, the last 10 overall, Chase Elliott has looks like the second best average finish in the last 10 races behind Harvick at 7.7. Now, he's starting second, so that doesn't look great there, but he's led laps here. He's been fast here. He actually has more top 10s in the last 10 races than Harvick does. So if Larson isn't the guy, which I think we all think he certainly can be, and if Kyle Busch isn't able to get around those two Hendrick guys, to be honest, I'm kind of thinking we might see a little bit of a Coke 600 type vibe for this race. I think we might see Chase Elliott lead a little bit, but I think we're going to see him run second quite a bit to Kyle Larson. It's going to be mostly Kyle Larson being fast, Chase Elliott being right there. Can he get him? Can he not? And then everyone else is kind of battling for third. I think that's kind of what we're going to get. Are you seeing something similar, or do you really think it's going to get mixed up more? Because I said aero plays a big part here at this track, and it's hard to pass people. This is part of the problem with this track in this package.
Yeah, it's definitely going to play a factor, the aero blocking, and so starting position is going to be a key factor in this. So there's guys that might be in better positions this week than we would really think they might be based on where they're starting. Like Matty D, if he wasn't starting fourth, I would want a little bit more exposure to him because he's been a little bit stronger here lately. He's been better in 550 equipment. I still will want him in some GBP environments, but you make a good point with him starting up there, being able to maybe help maintain that starting position by aero blocking and this track being a little bit more difficult to pass at, that might be more beneficial to him over the long-term portion of this race. He's also good at restarting. This track seems to be something that if you're a good restarter, it will help you do that. I know that basically looking at everything like that, then yeah, you see Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott there 1 and 2. I really think we'll probably get a dynamic of those two leading a good portion of this race, and probably depending on who gets out front, that person might lead a little bit more. That driver might lead a little bit more than the other driver. So we'll obviously have to see how it all plays out. But yeah, there are factors that are playing into the strategy this week that haven't been there here since we've been on some road courses.
So when we break down the stats, kind of ran some rankings and to try to get maybe a little bit clearer picture of the driver's performance here. And this will be kind of over the course of the last 10 races, 8 for Kyle Larson, of course. Harvick's the best driver. The second best driver, someone we haven't talked about quite yet, and that's Martin Truex. Now, he doesn't have any wins here, at least over the last 10, but he has five top fives, which isn't as good as Harvick, but it's still pretty good. But I mentioned, or maybe I didn't, but he's got 18.1 fastest laps over the last 10 and 20.4 average laps led and 102 driver rating. Pretty solid numbers here. Now, you don't get him with a lot of PD upside. Are you interested in Truex at all?
Not really, just because he's not been that strong in this 550 equipment compared to the 750 horsepower package. We've talked about it extensively throughout the season. Is Michigan on the playoff schedule?
It's not.
Okay, so I really don't think I'm going to really want too much exposure. He could have a decent performance this week, but his average finish is 14th in 550 equipment. And with two top fives where his priced at, I think it's just going to be difficult for me to want to roster him too much. But I will maybe sprinkle him in some GPP tournaments just to be a little bit different. But I think there's other guys that I might want to take a look at in the position this week. How about you?
Obviously, GPP. I don't necessarily see him getting out in front, but I think if you're going to build some Truex lineups, you kind of build it accordingly. You might build one where he's just a really solid guy, low ownership, but you may build one where he's more of that potential dominator. But I do agree. I mean, in this package, they haven't been nearly as strong, but I think they're going to want a good, strong finish. Um,
And and with the guys in that price range, I think one that jumped out to me, a driver that jumped out to me that I really wasn't looking at because of some from data earlier in this season was Joey Logano. He's $9,600. Yeah. He's $9,600. He's starting 19th. Great place differential, upside, which you really want. He hasn't been super strong here of late. 550 just been pathetic in. Like 550 equipment's just not been that great. He has only 3 top 10s in 10 races, yeah. And it's just not been that strong. But if you look at his recent Michigan data, this has been one of his more consistent and better tracks. So I'm kind of curious to see how they approach this, especially as we're getting into the playoff mix here. If they kind of want to attack this a little bit more to get their mindset right, or if they're like we've seen it earlier in the season with 550 horsepower tracks, not really prioritizing it, and this might not look as enticing as what it does initially.
so yeah, you mentioned Logano. I was going to talk about him next because kind of in my ranking that I did, kind of contributing, average finish, your wins, your top fives, tens, 15s, 20s, fastest laps, laps led, driver rating, and a few others. He is ranking out as the third best driver. His average finish is ninth here. He has 2 wins at this track um, in the last 10. And you mentioned, he's leading a lot of laps, but he has been, like you said, he's been very poor in this package. But the thing is, this week he starts 19th because of that wreck that we talked about at Indy. But it seems to me with Logano, sometimes when he starts in the back, even if he's at a good track, he still has a hard time getting to the front, especially this year in the 550s. I want to be all over him. I think he should be a better play than his teammate Brad, who's $200 more expensive and one spot behind him. He should be better, but I do have a little hesitancy because of the reasons you gave about the 550 performance this year. Are you strictly going? How are you planning on kind of playing Logano? Is it mostly just GPP for you, or are you actually going to try to stack him with a Kyle Larson or a Kyle Busch to try to get that dominator plus the PD? What's your thoughts on how you play Logano? Because I think you've got to play him. His stats are good enough where you got to kind of risk it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll have a little different approaches to the way I will roster him, but I think having him with Kyle Busch or Kyle Larson or somebody that you think, or Chase Elliott, somebody you think is going to dominate, absolutely go for it. I think it's a great opportunity to get him at you can't get that place differential at $9,600 out of Joey Logano very often. So whenever you are able to take the opportunity to do it, if you don't feel 100% comfortable based on his 550 horsepower data, whatever the case may be, don't go as heavy on him. I'm not going to go more than probably like 30% ownership on him, but I want to have a good enough amount of exposure. If he does kind of what we think he's capable of doing, then he will pay off very nicely. Also, you mentioned his teammate Brad Keselowski. These two both swap spotters this week. That was news that was that came out. So Coleman Presley will spot for Logano now, and TJ Majors will spot for Keselowski. So that's a different dynamic. What's your thought on that heading into this week? Is that play into your factor of wanting to roster him or anything along those lines?
Not to me. That doesn't make too much of a difference. This news came out, I guess, after they recorded the podcast. But I want to kind of just take a quick little side note here. Do you get a chance to listen to the Door Bumper Clear podcast much?
No, I haven't. I hadn't listened to it here in a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty solid. I like the insight that you get from the spotters. Whether it's always right or wrong, it's still interesting because they are very much obviously in the industry. They get to go to all races, so that you get a lot of good little tidbits here and there, or at least perspective. But one of the things that they do is, they have it where you can call into the show and then they play your recording or whatever at the end of the show. And the running joke is TJ Major sucks. And it's mostly due to the fact that Logano doesn't have a lot of fans. I mean, he's got a lot of fans, but most NASCAR fans typically don't like Logano, whether it was, his run-ins with, Kenseth or Kyle Busch or, well, pretty much anybody. Like, he's got plenty of enemies out there. So TJ kind of gets that, or has been getting that, like, hey, you suck. But it's mostly Logano. I'm wondering if he's still going to get those calls this from moving forward. If they're still going to end the call with TJ, you suck, or if it's going to be TJ, you're awesome. Like, what's going to happen there? Honestly, I'm more curious about that dynamic than how it's going to play out on the track, because TJ, I think he's a great spotter. I listen to him sometimes on Sunday or whenever they're doing the Cup races with Logano. But I like to listen some of these younger guys in the truck, or younger guys and gals in the trucks and Xfinity, because these are some of the next guys coming up. And I started listening more to him when he's spotting for Hailie Deegan, because she's really new to this series. So he's doing a lot of coaching where you don't hear him coaching Logano. They have their own sort of communication, but you really hear him trying to coach her and get her around the track better. And that's helped me understand more about what these teams are trying to do, how these cars or trucks, whatever, how they drive. So honestly, I'm a pretty big fan. I think Logano is losing a great spotter. I think he's for sure one of the higher end spotters of the Cup Series. But it sounds like this guy that they're bringing in, apologies, I don't remember the name of the guy who's spotting for Brad, but apparently him and Logano already have a really good friendship. So maybe that will help Logano out a little bit more, and maybe the shakeup with TJ and Brad, maybe it does help them out. But personally, I'm not going to be playing one guy more or less just because of this spotter change. If it was a crew chief change, that would be a little different, or a pit crew change, that might change my mind. But as far as spotting goes, at the Cup level, most of these guys they're top notch.
Yeah, I would think it's going to be something that we'll see how ultimately it plays out. Maybe next week at Daytona we'll see a little bit more of it being an impact because of the pack type racing. Maybe TJ Majors is an asset to Keselowski. Who knows? It will be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out.
Don't forget, those two were running 2 and 3 at the end of the 500 at Daytona, and they wrecked each other. Now, I'm not saying the spotters had anything to do with that. I don't really know, but I think that is a good, fair point. This week, I don't think it really matters too much. And maybe that's why they're doing it this week, so they have one race under their belts working together for the super speedways. Maybe that's something Penske or the drivers or whatever. Maybe they think, hey, I'd feel more comfortable with this guy spotting versus this one. I don't know. I don't know how all that went down. But I think that is a great point. Some tracks you don't need your spotters as much. Daytona and Talladega, you you need the best spotter because it's pack racing the whole time, and every little move counts. So I think that was a great point bringing up Daytona in that regard. But if we kind of get back to Michigan and we look at some of the guys, we kind of glossed over a few guys higher up on the salary board. Um, we both obviously think Larson has a great shot to dominate and should probably be played. Kyle Busch, I agree with you. I think he's solid. Been really good in 550. Got pretty good numbers here. Um, been running really well. I don't count too much of the road courses in that because they're very different. But I think Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson are like you need to find ways to get them in your lineups. It all depends on how many you're entering and what type of contest, but both are playable, both have opportunities to dominate. But two guys I want to talk about, and they're kind of in different positions but similar salaries, and that's Denny Hamlin and William Byron. So Hamlin comes in, he's starting ninth, 10-4, no longer the points leader for the regular season championship. He is locked in on points based on the race last week. Are you interested in Hamlin much this week?
This week, not as strongly as I would have thought I would be. It's just he's been strong here at Michigan. He's got an average of top 5 finish here the last 4 races. 550 horsepower data has been so-so. That's kind of why I'm leaning with that price tag. I don't really want to go there too much. I actually would lean on the other driver you just mentioned a little bit more so. That's William Byron. I think he offers that path to value a little bit more so than Denny Hamlin does this week because of that starting position. He's also been pretty blazing fast in 550 equipment throughout the season. Maybe not as much so since the All-Star race. He's kind of been in a slump. But I think this is a track that might allow him to kind of get the wheels spinning again and get some momentum headed into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean he hasn't been the worst. Ranks out as kind of like the 6th best driver since the All Star race, but the biggest issue is everyone around him. He's got the worst average finish, 16.4, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, whereas Denny Hamlin has 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and almost a 10-point better rating for driver rating. But I think the kind of the way Michigan races, as fast as Hendrick's been. I mean, we saw him before the curb destroyed his car. He was kind of that 3rd best car, and even threatening to kind of be that 2nd best car of the Hendricks. I mean, Hendrick was running like 1, 2, 3 for a good portion of that race, and he was that 3rd Hendrick car. So I think he's kind of rebounded from that little bit of slump he's in. Obviously, you never know. Any sort of wrecks can obviously happen. Pit road issues can obviously happen, but I think if they avoid those problems that have kind of plagued them a little bit, I think they can get a good finish. It should get positive PD. I think getting some fastest laps is certainly possible, and I mean it's not a slam dunk path to value. I mean he needs to still have a pretty good finish, being 10-2. If he just cracks the top 10, he's probably going to be a little lower than 5x, which is not what
for sure.
not what you want from someone at that price tag. But I think if he's threatening for a top 5, top 3 again, which I mean he won his race earlier this year on a 550 track, I mean, different style, but still, I think he's playable. You think he's going to end up being the highest PD guy that's or let me rephrase that, the highest owned between Brad and Joey, because those are like the three higher end PD plays, and then we get some
Yeah,
lower
it's gonna be interesting to see where ownership falls if people are really wanting to find Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, and William Byron if they're using one of those three drivers as place differential guys to offset a Kyle Larson or a Kyle Busch. Because Chase Elliott's cheaper this week. He's $9,200 starting second. He could be a dominator. So there's a lot of different ways you could approach this week.
right. And if he's able to maintain a good finish and just pick up some easy laps led and is fairly fast throughout the race, he doesn't have to do as much to pay off that price tag. And I would think
You're talking about Chase Elliott?
Chase Elliott, I would think that he's. I mean, it's hard to say with Chase Elliott. I mean, when you're the most popular driver in the series, you're going to carry higher ownership than maybe you should at a certain price point. Um, but I think there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to want to overlook it. They're going to be going to that Larson. They might go Harvick based on track history. They're probably going to go Logano for that PD. They might go Byron that PD. I kind of see Truex obviously going pretty low owned given his position, and I understand that. Chase Elliott probably going a little or lower owned than he probably should, and I think Blaney's another guy that will probably get overlooked too.
I think Blaney will go more over. Well, I don't know. I don't think Chase Elliott's going to go overlooked at that price. I don't think so at all. I think he'll be probably somebody that you can rely on. He's been strong lately. There's no reason not to play him in my opinion. Even 550 equipment, he's been strong. I don't know what would steer people from not wanting to play him unless they're just going a complete Kyle Larson domination.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think, yeah, if you're playing one of these top two or even three guys on the salary board, if you're kind of expecting them to be the main dominators, you're probably trying to build more of your lineup around PD after that point, and he doesn't offer
Right.
that. Obviously,
Right.
a much higher risk if he gets into trouble because he's starting second. We're not at a
Yep.
road course anymore. So that's why I kind of think that potentially Chase goes maybe a little lower on than he should. But being the most popular guy, I don't really know. Blaney, I think, truly is in a kind of a tough spot for me to want to play. He's decent on 550. He's got a win on 550 at Atlanta. He was able to run down Kyle Larson, who dominated that race. So it's certainly possible that he pays it off. But starting third, I think that's a tough spot for Blaney, too. Are you going to try to force a lot of Blaney in, try to catch a little lower ownership?
Yeah, I'll have a little bit of him, but I'm not going to force him in to lineups on purpose. I will definitely want to have some exposure in the GPP environment because I think this is the style of track, and he has been really strong here at the last few races. That I feel comfortable kind of having a little bit of exposure, but I would feel a little bit more comfortable with Chase Elliott this week.
Yeah, that Hendrick domination this year is no joke. And speaking of Hendrick, I think another guy that will be interesting to see how his ownership plays out is Alex Bowman, 8,800 starting 10th. I can see him doing really well here, and maybe actually being the guy at the end of the race who ends up pulling it off. I don't necessarily see a ton of domination from him, but leading the last 20, 25 laps or so, they could certainly play off. Are you seeing potentially something similar from?
Yeah, he potentially. I think the numbers speak for itself in the 550 horsepower package. 40% of the time he's getting in the top five. So to me, I think that's worth risking it a little bit. He does have a win in 550 equipment as well. $8,800. He's right there on that nice price tag with what that upside is. I think you want to lean a little bit in GPP tournaments his way.
Yeah, he's got two top tens in the last four races here too. So been a bit of a struggle, a track that he struggled at, but just kind of like what we've said many times with William Byron, he's performed better than his career stats this year for the most part. But he has been the most inconsistent of the Hendrick cars by far this year. So It is a little tough to feel confident playing Alex Bowman in that position. 10th, there's obviously not a ton of PD upside, but I think it's a solid play. I think Kurt Busch, you could play. Amarillo, I'm cautious on, but I think obviously the next big heavy hitter as far as ownership is probably going to be Christopher Bell. He was looking good, pretty solid at Indy. Got caught up in that wreck, one of the wrecks. Starts 28th at 8,100. He doesn't have to do that much to be over 5x. I mean, he just needs to be knocking on the door of a top 15. Are you going to be
Yeah, and that's
exposed on him this week?
uh, th- th- I really think he's in a great position. The only thing that concerns me is the 550 data. This is not the greatest package for him. I got an average finish of 19th. He only has 2 top 15s in 10 races this year.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. But whenever you're needing only a top 15 at that price tag, and with what we've seen out of Gibbs consistently throughout the year, I think he's worth playing for sure this week.
So would you consider locking Christopher Bell, locking Austin Dillon in, and then building around the 4 spots remaining? Because Austin Dillon's next
You could
board at 8,000. He starts 26th. We know he's still in a points battle with his teammate trying to get into the playoffs. Uh, Pretty good data for Austin Dillon. I mean, it's Austin Dillon, so we don't have a ton of great career history. But starting 26th with the car that we've seen so far this year, I mean, I think that's a pretty solid play there. What's your
well,
thoughts on Dillon?
oh, we got plenty of data on Austin Dillon. He's got 10 full races here in our 10 full race sample size. This is one of the most experienced tracks he's been at, honestly. So I think this week I feel more comfortable playing Austin Dillon than I have in quite a while. I played him a lot last week. Unfortunately, the incident bit me, but he's in a position this week where he really needs to step up. And I think based on his 550 data, even this year, he's averaging a top 10. So there's a lot of reasons I'm looking at him this week. I even have some the bets on him to get a straight out win this week, albeit very small. I think he's got a lot on his plate. They'll be in the positions to get stage points and things like that. It's going to be interesting to see if he's able to find himself there at the end to really hammer home a super aggressive 7-8x kind of finish.
So I'm going to skip over a couple people real quick just because we're talking about Austin Dillon. I want to circle back around and I want to talk about Tyler Reddick real quick. He's
Mm-hmm.
7,400, so he's $600 cheaper. He starts 14th. Um, he won both stages. That was their play. It was looking like a great day for him, but both him and Dillon, they both got caught up in the wreck. Bad finish. Um, he was able to kind of nurse it around, no hood. He definitely was missing some pieces, limping around to that checkered last week. More likely to get a win at Michigan, Austin Dillon or Tyler Reddick, in your opinion?
Austin Dillon. I think based on everything I'm looking at for 550 horsepower data and then where they're at in the season and everything that's kind of playing out to this point, I think Austin Dillon has the slight upper hand.
Well, he has been better, at least average finish wise, on 550 than Austin Dillon. 10.3 versus a 12.6. But Tyler Reddick does have one more top 10. He has 60% hit rate on top 10s, whereas Austin Dillon's at 50%. Austin Dillon's got a edge in top 15s. So I'd say Austin Dillon has been more consistent in the 550s, but I'm seeing as much upside, if not more, from Tyler Reddick. From a DraftKings perspective, if they both are up there towards the front, obviously Dillon's the play because he's got way more PD upside. But as far as just a chance to win, honestly, I think I'm going Reddick over Dillon because I feel like he's just been a little faster and he's more aggressive. I think Dillon is, I don't want to say more cautious. I don't know if it's even more calculated. He just seems to be just a half step back from the aggression, or maybe a full step back from the aggression that Tyler Reddick has, which obviously can bite you. But I think if there's one of those two that's going to pull out a win here, you're going to have to be aggressive with the way the arrow works here. To me, I would give the slight advantage to Tyler Reddick. But I think from a DraftKings perspective, Austin Dillon is for sure a safer play of the two, given the starting position.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to kind of see how it all plays out. But to me, Austin Dillon's one of my favorite plays of the weekend.
But yeah, I definitely like him. But yeah, first my point was just straight up wins.
Absolutely.
Some guys I don't want to talk too much about. We've already talked quite a bit about a lot of guys, but we need to briefly mention Daniel Suarez. He starts 30th, 7,800. He's definitely a play for me, but I'm a little cautious because there's been some inconsistency with that team. Ross Chastain is the next guy on the list, 22nd, and then you got Ryan Preece, 7,500, starting 32nd. I kind of lumped them all together because I think you're gonna end up with at least one of those guys in most of the lineups because they offer such good PD upside. Out of those three, which one are you wanting to hammer more than the others?
Ryan Preece is my play this weekend. He's somebody that might. I don't think he flies under the radar. I think people are going to look at the data and see that, hey, this guy has potential here this week. He's got an average finish of 18th here at Michigan over the last 4 races with a top 10. He's not in the best equipment, but even in not being in the best equipment, 550 horsepower data is still strong. He's got an average finish of 19th this year with 2 top 10s. That is really good information to have whenever he's starting 32nd. $7,500 is a nice little price tag, but if he's able to get a top 20, he's right there on the cusp of 5x. And if he goes any higher than that, then that's even more value. So I think he has the most upside. Ross Chastain, really, in my opinion, this week isn't in the greatest of spots. This package is going to be interesting to see how they perform. They've been strong in some races and some races not so strong. More strong races here recently. So see if he can get some better performance out of it.
Yeah, so if we look at those 550 stats, which you will be able to see in our garage thoughts on our Patreon, they're really close. There's only one guy in between those, and that's Ricky Stenhouse. But Chastain ranks that as the 20th best driver according to driver rating. Ryan Preece is 22. Daniel Suarez is 23. So none of them are really that solid. They both seem to kind of favor the 750s a little bit more. But I do have to agree with you. I think Ryan Preece, because he's the cheapest of those of three, he has the most PD upside, at least looking at the numbers of the three. I do think Chastain has potentially the best chance to get the best highest finish and maybe overperform just a little bit from where we're talking about. But I think if we're just kind of looking at paper, track performance, uh, package performance, I'm with you. I think Priest is the play, and I don't like playing Priest at 7,500. I'll be honest, but you kind of got to do what you got to do, and there's not a ton of easy, solid value that just jumps out at you on the slate. So I think you're going to kind of end up at a Ryan Priest.
And there's really, yeah, really below these guys, it's going to be hard to find any value, in my opinion, this week because of the starting positions and then track history associated with some of this in the mix. It's going to be interesting to see where ownership does fall because there's a muddy middle under these guys that I don't know if people really want to have any exposure to most of these drivers except for in GPP tournament environments.
Yeah, I think Benedetto is obviously a GPP play. Because of the arrow, I think he could potentially maintain position. He doesn't have the best long run speed, but he's got really good short run speed, and he's one of the best guys at starts and restarts. So I think he's in a kind of a sneaky GPP play, but there's not a lot of upside. So you're just kind of hoping for low ownership and him kind of maintain that. I don't really like Ryan Newman here. I never really like playing Ryan Newman, to be honest, anymore. He he's sneaky. I mean, obviously, if you played him last week, it was great. His car was junked the entire race, but because everyone wrecked out in front of him, I think he maintained or got a top 10 or was close to it. Don't like Newman. Custer was looking great last week on the road course. I don't expect that same type of performance here. You can look his way because of the PD upside. Personally, I don't like Stenhouse. Briscoe is in a tough spot. Busher maybe is a just kind of a
He's
sneaky play.
Yeah, it's so weird with being 11th, but 6,500 it could be a benefit, but man, I just have a hard time wanting to do that.
Because
But it could.
I don't remember if it was Homestead or if it was a different 550, but there was a couple tracks early on where like he drove up to the front in like the first stage and I think even in the second stage, but yeah, by the time the race was over, he was still back in like 15th, 16th, 17th.
Yeah, because I could see him getting that 15th. Yeah, and if he wasn't starting 11th, that would be a little bit more enticing, but I don't see him gaining much. He could maintain that kind of position, but I don't think he's going to really threaten anything higher, so that price tag is still almost a wash, but he could pay dividends.
Right. Yeah, so that's kind of a sneaky play. You can certainly build, especially if you're doing some mass entries. Why not take a risk on Busher? But I agree. Bubba Wallace, because of that price tag starting 15th, he's got. We have to admit, car wise, there's top 10 upside. Driver wise, I think there's still quite a bit of room for improvement.
And in the 550 horsepower package, like he has a little bit of speed with this, so I could see him potentially having a decent day here. He's got four um, top 15 finishes in this package, and even a top 5 and a top 10. So we could see a decent performance. I would lean on him a little bit in tournament environments.
He's been better over the last few races. Like they've for sure
Hmm.
gotten better as a team. We're starting to see a little bit more consistency, even on road courses, albeit guys wrecking in front of them. They weren't always running that way during the race. But I do think Bubba Wallace is on the board. I think it's going to be tough for Eric Jones to reach value, so I probably won't have any exposure to him. So really, after we talk about Priest and Reddick as being pretty solid plays, after everyone we just talked about, to me the best play after those is Michael McDowell, 6,000, starting 25th. It's not a super speedway, so he's not a lock. But I think there's some good upside. He's got some pretty decent numbers for 550, 6,000. You don't have to do much. If he's able to just crack the top 20, he's at 5x.
Exactly, and
Few things go wrong with some guys in front of him, and he gets a top 15. Well, he's looking really, really good. I mean, every position for him increases his value so much because he's so cheap.
yeah, $6,000. I want to have some exposure to him because, like you said, on 550 horsepower tracks, he's been more consistent than 750. So to me, this is the kind of place that you can go and get him because if he's averaging a 14th place finish in the 550 horsepower package, so three top tens, that's 30% of the time that he's being able to do that. Not the greatest, but starting 25th at 6,000, like you said, top 20, he's already 5x. That's great path to value, and there's not a lot of drivers below him that I feel have a shot at doing anything more. I think Anthony Alfredo right below him might be the only other driver I feel will have any sort of path to value, if you will. $5,800 starting 35th. If he has a decent day, he could get a 24th place finish and something along those lines and reach 5x, but it's going to be a little bit more challenging for him based on his equipment and things like that. I would definitely lean Michael McDowell more so than Anthony Alfredo.
For sure. The $200 difference doesn't look like much, but the thing is, I haven't built full lineups yet, so it may end up being a lot depending on how the higher end guys, how you're building those. So if you have to go to Alfredo, I think it's playable. But I'm with you. I think McDowell is the last safe guy on the board that I would say, and obviously there's really hardly ever safe plays. Um, really, the other big news of the week is Corey LaJoy will not be racing in this race. He tested positive for COVID. As far as I know, he's either asymptomatic or very, very mild symptoms, but they are not going to let him race. So in the Spire 7 car this week, we have the Xfinity People's Champ, if you will, Josh Berry. I'm sure there's some people who've known about him for years, but I didn't know about him until this year, until he started, driving for. Well, actually, I think I first heard about him listening to Dale Jr.'s podcast, and that's where I first kind of got my first, like, oh, okay, I know that name. And then seeing him race, and then seeing him win Martinsville, his like home track where he's been so good in, I think it's the late models. He's a guy that's really grown on me. He also got announced he will be in the 8 car. I think it's going to be the 8 car full time next year for Junior Motorsports. So that's exciting. But he's stepping in for Corey LaJoie at this track. Are you expecting any Josh Berry magic? Because he did fill in for, who did he fill in for earlier this year?
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. I know exactly. I remember him doing that, but I can't remember who and what the circumstance. It might have been. I can't remember honestly.
I know it wasn't a very good performing car, and he did. Oh, I think it was Justin Haley. I think he filled in for Justin Haley either for
Whenever Justin Haley got in that accident,
Yeah, that's what it
Justin
was.
Haley.
Yeah, it was a
Yep.
short track.
So
I think it was Pocono, maybe.
maybe it was might have been that back-to-back weekend.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's stepping in. I think unfortunately he'll go to the back because of the driver swap, so he'll still be charted with that 24th place starting position, but he'll start in the back 37th, and that right there to me is going to make it want to be very difficult for him in that equipment to be able to get through the field. I don't really think he's got a very strong path to value. Unfortunately, I wish it was a little bit different circumstances, but to me, I'm not going to be wanting to roster him very much. I might have him in 1 or 2 tournament plays, just because he is a great driver. But I just don't know if that with the equipment and with the quick turnaround that he'll be able to do much with it this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, the 5600. If you need someone cheap and you couldn't afford McDowell or maybe couldn't afford Alfredo, then obviously he's kind of that next guy. But if this was like a short track or something like that, I'd be all over it because I think he could make that up. That seems to be more of his specialty. But a big 2 mile track like Michigan, it's certainly possible, but I think there's still going to be a learning curve. I believe this is only his second cup race. So I would expect him still to be trying to get comfortable with that car. And I would imagine the team's goal is probably top 25, 25th, 24th, which is a good day given the circumstances. But from a DraftKings perspective, I mean, if we give him 26, or excuse me, 22nd, that's still below 4x. Um, I I don't know. I mean, I guess if it allows you to hit all the other players right, Priest, Logano, maybe Byron and Kyle Larson, maybe if it helps you fit all those guys in and they go bonkers, maybe. But I think realistically, mathematically, unless unless there's some crazy wrecks towards the end of the race and it's like a super speedway, I don't see him.
I'd much rather play Michael McDowell. Yeah, I'd much rather play Michael McDowell, $6,400 more. He's starting in 25th. He'll stay in 25th, and he'll have upside. So that's where I'm at. These drivers below them, I honestly don't think we even need to really touch on this week. I think
Well, you don't want to talk about Quinn Half, the Halfinator, 4,500, the pun of all punts. I mean,
no, not this week. I don't think we need it. I think it's going to be fun to kind of see how things kind of shape up. This week is a little bit different for you and I with this way we're doing this podcast, but I'm excited for the race headed into this final section of the regular season, man.
yeah, yeah. If Half was starting maybe last, then maybe you could look at him. But he's starting too high up. I think you nailed it. McDowell, Alfredo, those are the bottom that you go. You squeeze in the best guys above them that you can. Um, you're right. It's been kind of a crazy week for us. So I hope this video turns out good. Let us know what y'all think out there. we'll improve on this format because I'm sure this won't be. We'll at least have one more like this with the race day rundown. But I would imagine we'll probably do a few more streams like this, and we'll continue to try to improve our presentation and equipment and all that. So, all in all, I've actually thought this was really good. I hope you all like it too. Any last little thoughts on Michigan? I'm good. I'm ready to get to it. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm ready to get to it. I think thanks for everyone for watching, even it being a little bit different situation for us doing this split screen, if you will. We definitely enjoy the on set full version of our podcast and the race day rundown, but we'll get the race day rundown out as well. We'll have it in this kind of format so that you'll still be able to see our impact scores. That's something that we really put a lot of effort into to bring you relative content that hopefully allows you to win and have some success in the DFS environment. That's something we really enjoyed being able to do, is produce the content that is hopefully relative to success. And we have a lot of other content besides our podcast and our race day rundown. We have our race guide. That's a digital magazine that allows you to kind of get some visual aspects of some of the numbers and some of the data points that we're looking at. And that's a downloadable magazine basically that you can check out in the descriptions below. Also, we have a great audience out there that has now become Patreon members. We have a Patreon that we produce some garage thoughts and some other information to help kind of guide you even more if you are into spreadsheets. That garage thoughts that Jeremy puts together every week, that is something that is available there for you as well. So there's a lot of different things that we try to do to add benefit to what we're doing here outside of the podcast. So we definitely appreciate the support there. Everybody that's liked that is following us on Twitter and Instagram, thank you very much. We try to be active out there as often as possible and give you additional information. And then thank you for hitting subscribe here on YouTube, and also for everyone that's been on the audio version of our podcast that's been taking off like wildfire. We definitely appreciate the support there. If you can continue to download the episodes, leave any comments that you would like to see for any future episodes or anything that you didn't see. Let us know. We like that engagement regardless. So and I don't know if I've got anything more to add. I'm just excited to kind of get this thing rolling and then get the race day rundown out to these folks.
Right there with you, man. We got trucks on here in a little bit, so I'm gonna probably hop off here and wrap up the garage thoughts and put the final touches on this and our race guide and get that out to everyone. Should be a fun race. And be staying tuned because we also have some new stuff for you guys coming this week. A new way to get in on the action besides just DraftKings. We've been playing around with another game type format, and we'll get into that either in the race day rundown, or we may make a special video for that. So stay tuned because I've been having fun with that. So
yeah, we've got that big news that we'll be able to drop, and we're excited to add another element to our content. It's just something that we're going to continue to try to do as we continue to grow this thing.
Yep.
And thank you so much for your support so far. It's very, very much appreciated.
Yeah. So with all that being said, we really do appreciate it. He's Joe. I'm Jeremy. This has been the DK Garage.